The Gilded Sparrow was not merely a restaurant, it was a theater of wealth. Located in the heart of New York City, its existence was a quiet declaration that some people lived on a different plane. Light, spun from colossal crystal chandeliers, dripped like liquid gold onto tables draped in starched white linen. The air, thick with the scent of truffle oil and expensive perfume, hummed with the low thrum of consequential conversations and the soft, melancholic sigh of a live jazz trio in the corner. Into this opulent theater moved Elara Vance. To the untrained eye, she was just part of the scenery, a silent figure in a simple black server's uniform, its cuffs just beginning to fray. Her brown hair was pulled back into a severe, functional bun, and her face was devoid of makeup, revealing a canvas of quiet focus. The only adornment she wore was a plain silver watch, its face scratched from years of faithful service, ticking away moments that seemed far removed from the timeless luxury surrounding her. She moved with an economy of motion, a practiced grace that made her almost invisible, which was precisely how most of the patrons preferred their servers. Tonight, the prize table, the one nestled in a velvet-lined alcove with a commanding view of the room, was occupied by Silas Croft. He was a German industrial billionaire, a man whose tailored suits looked as if they were forged from steel and arrogance. He carried his power not with grace, but as a cudgel, expecting every room to bend to his presence. Beside him sat his assistant, Lyle, a lean man whose perpetually smirking face gave him the look of a predator's sidekick. Elara approached their table, her presence a whisper against the room's ambient roar. Silas glanced at her once, a dismissive flick of his eyes that catalogued her worn uniform and simple appearance, and then turned to Lyle. He spoke in sharp, guttural German, confident that this creature of the service industry, this piece of functional furniture, would be deaf to his contempt. "I'm astonished they hire staff like this," he muttered, his lip curling. "She looks like she belongs in a roadside diner, not a place of this caliber." Lyle snickered, a sound like tearing silk. "Perhaps she's the charitable contribution for the evening, sir." Elara's expression remained placid. She offered the menus with a steady hand. Silas didn't take his. He flicked it with his forefinger, sending it skidding across the tablecloth toward her. "The specials," he commanded in English, his tone dripping with condescension. "Let's hope you can remember them." She didn't flinch. She took their order, her posture immaculate, her voice a soft, respectful murmur. When she returned with the amuse-bouche, a delicate construction of seared scallop and saffron foam, she set it down before Silas. The room's golden light caught in her clear, steady eyes for a moment as she looked directly at him. Then, in flawless, accent-free German, she replied, "I hope it is to your liking, Herr Croft. It is a variation on the exact recipe you praised so highly to Chef Richter in Berlin last May." The air at the table froze. Silas's condescending smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of stunned disbelief. Lyle's jaw went slack, his smirk wiped clean from his face. From the adjacent tables, where snippets of the German exchange had been caught, heads began to turn. The low hum of conversation faltered. Elara Vance stood there, her hands as steady as a surgeon's as she poured water into their glasses, the quiet splashing of the water, the only sound in the sudden, sharp silence she had created. The first crack had appeared in her simple veneer, revealing something hard and brilliant beneath. The initial shock did not breed respect in Silas Croft. It festered into indignation. Being caught off guard by a waitress was an affront to his entire worldview, a disruption in the natural order of things. He leaned back, attempting to reclaim his authority through posture alone. "A trained parrot can repeat phrases," he murmured to Lyle in German, his voice low but carrying. "It changes nothing." He refused to look at Elara again, instead addressing the space she occupied as if she were a disembodied voice. He wanted his wine, and he wanted it now. The judgment, however, was no longer confined to their table. It had become a spectator sport. At the next table, a woman named Genevieve poured into a crimson velvet dress, leaned toward her date. "Is she new?" she whispered, her voice a stage whisper meant to be overheard. "She looks so dreadfully out of place. One expects a certain polish." Her date, a man whose watch cost more than a car, chuckled without looking up from his phone. Elara moved past them, carrying a tray of martinis, her balance perfect, her steps even. She had heard worse. She had been trained for a world of far higher stakes than this, a world where a misplaced word could scuttle a trade deal, and a flicker of an eye could betray a negotiation. Her father, a titan of finance, and her mother, a diplomat who conversed in 5 languages, had taught her that composure was armor. So she remained armored, her face a calm, neutral mask. But the pressure was building. As she cleared a glass, a hedge fund broker named Preston, his tie loosened and his voice loud with liquor, snapped his fingers at her. "Hey, sweetheart," he barked, the word an insult. "You forgot the lemon twist in my drink. What, they don't teach you that in Waitress school?" His table erupted in braying laughter. Alara paused, her hand on the empty glass. She turned to face him, her eyes locking onto his for a fraction of a second, a moment of such focused intensity that his laughter caught in his throat. "My apologies, sir," she said, her voice even. "I will correct it immediately." As in 20. She walked to the bar, returned with a perfect spiral of lemon peel, and placed it on a napkin beside his drink with a small, formal nod. Preston blinked, thrown off by her unshakable calm. He muttered something under his breath as she walked away, but the victory felt hollow. The room was watching her, and the tension was coiling tighter. Silas, unwilling to let his authority be challenged, decided to escalate. He called her back, his voice louder now, performing for the room. "Let's truly test that memory of yours," he said in rapid German, rattling off a complex order designed to trip her up. "The duck confit with the bilberry reduction, the grilled branzino special but with the sauce on the side, and the truffle pasta with no parmesan but extra mushrooms." Lyle, eager to get back in his employer's good graces, piled on. "And roasted asparagus, truffle, mashed potatoes, and a side salad with the vinaigrette separate. Don't mess it up." His smirk was back, a dare in human form. A couple at a nearby table chuckled openly, turning in their seats to watch the show. Alara stood there, her notepad still tucked, untouched, in her apron. Her pen had not moved. She simply listened, her gaze fixed on a point just beyond Silas's shoulder. When they were finished, a profound quiet settled over the table. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't write a single word down. She just nodded once, turned, and walked back toward the kitchen's swinging doors, leaving a wake of arrogant certainty that she was about to fail spectacularly. Years ago, Alara had stood in a different kind of room. It was a sun-drenched lecture hall at the University of Berlin, the air thick with the smell of old books and ambition. Her classmates furiously scribbled notes as a renowned professor lectured on global trade deficits. She had been the star of her international economics program, fluent in 4 languages, her mind a sharp, analytical tool that could unravel the most complex problems. She had thrived on the intellectual combat of debates, the camaraderie of late-night study sessions. Then, her mother got sick, cancer, the kind that doesn't offer a timeline, only a thief's promise to take everything. Alara didn't think twice. She packed a single bag, abandoned her degree, her apartment, her entire life in Germany, and flew back to New York. That life, the one of lecture halls and academic accolades, felt like a distant dream as she navigated the controlled chaos of the restaurant kitchen, the clatter of pans and the shouts of chefs, a stark contrast to the quiet halls of academia. When she emerged from the kitchen, balancing a large tray with impossible ease, a hush fell over Silas Croft's section of the dining room. She moved with the same serene grace as before, but now all eyes were fixed on her. She set down the plates, one by one. The duck confit, its skin a perfect, crisp mahogany. The grilled branzino, the sauce in a small silver boat beside it. The truffle pasta, fragrant and rich with extra mushrooms, conspicuously free of parmesan. The asparagus, the mashed potatoes, the salad with its dressing on the side. Every single detail was perfect. Then, she did something unexpected. She reached into her apron and produced a small, elegant card. In a neat, cursive script, it listed the primary ingredients and flavor profiles for each of the dishes Silas had ordered first in English, then in German. She placed it gently beside his plate. "I learned this recipe from the head chef at the Adlon Kempinski in Hamburg," she said softly, her German as smooth as velvet. "Back when you were a regular there. You always said he used a touch too much star anise in the reduction." Silas's fork, halfway to his mouth, stopped dead. Lyle's face went white. The woman at the next table, Genevieve, leaned so far forward she nearly fell out of her chair, whispering, "Did she just say Hamburg?" The confrontation escalated. A woman dripping in diamonds from a nearby table, a fashion influencer whose life was a curated gallery of perfection, called out. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice laced with saccharin poison, "but that watch of yours, it's a bit outdated, isn't it? It doesn't really fit the vibe here." Her friends giggled, their phones already angled to capture the moment. Ilara glanced at the silver watch, a gift from her late father. The crystal was scratched, but it had never lost a second. "It keeps time," she said simply, her gaze meeting the woman's without a trace of shame. Silas, seeing an opportunity to regain the upper hand, let out a harsh laugh. "I doubt her entire salary could afford a single bottle of this wine," he declared in German, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Ilara set the wine bottle down, her movements slow and deliberate. She looked directly at Silas, her eyes holding his. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice still soft but now edged with something unbreakable. "2 years ago, in Munich, at Tantris, you told the sommelier that this particular vintage should breathe for exactly 12 minutes. No more, no less. You were very specific." The room went utterly still. Klaus's wineglass froze in his hand. "I was there that day," she added, the words landing like surgical strikes. "I remember it well." He stared at her, his mind scrambling. He tried to dismiss her, to put her back in her box. "Speaking well doesn't change your station in life," he sneered. Ilara tilted her head slightly, a gesture of almost pitying curiosity. "How interesting you say that," she replied in German, her voice so clear it seemed to cut through the very air. "Since I am the second largest shareholder of Adler Holdings Bank." The words detonated in the silence. Before anyone could process it, she reached into her apron again and pulled out her phone. With a swipe of her thumb, she brought up an email. She held it out, not flaunting it, just presenting a fact. The screen glowed with the bank's official logo above a string of digital signatures from the board of directors, confirming a recent transfer of controlling shares. A collective gasp went through the room. Genevieve's phone, which had been recording, clattered onto her plate. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Silas Croft's face, already pale, turned the color of ash. His hand gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, as if he were trying to hold on to a world that was rapidly crumbling beneath him. The silence that followed Ilara's revelation was heavier than any sound. It was a vacuum, filled with the shattered arrogance of Silas Croft. He stared at the phone screen, then at Ilara's calm, impassive face. The woman in the simple server's uniform held a significant portion of his family's legacy in the palm of her hand. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with breathtaking speed. Lyle looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his mouth opening and closing silently. Preston, the loudmouth broker, was suddenly fascinated by the pattern on his plate. Genevieve and her friends were furiously whispering, their faces a mixture of shock and mortification. It was Silas who finally broke the silence, his voice a hoarse croak. "If that's true, why?" He gestured around the opulent room, at her uniform, at the life he couldn't reconcile with the information he had just been given. "Why would you work here?" It was a genuine question, the first thing he had said all night that wasn't coded in contempt. Ilara's expression softened for the first time, the professional mask giving way to something deeply personal. She didn't look at Silas, but at a quiet table in the far corner of the restaurant, partially hidden by a large potted palm. "I work here," she said, her German now gentle, almost melodic, "because my mother loves this restaurant's chocolate torte." She pointed with a subtle nod of her head. "She's sitting right over there." As one, the entire restaurant turned. At the corner table sat an older woman, her gray hair styled elegantly, a warm, intelligent smile on her face as she watched her daughter. It was Madeline. She saw the room looking at her and gave a small, graceful wave, her eyes shining with a soft, maternal pride that needed no translation. The context of the evening snapped into focus for everyone present. This wasn't a corporate power play. It wasn't about revenge or humiliating a billionaire. It was an act of profound love. A murmur of understanding and empathy rippled through the crowd. Some people nodded slowly, others looked down at their tables, ashamed of their earlier amusement. The man in the navy suit who had watched the confrontation started to stand, as if to apologize, then thought better of it and sat back down. Silas Croft stared at Madeline, then back at Ilara. He saw not a business rival or an upstart, but a daughter who had willingly donned a servant's uniform to be near her ailing mother, to bring her a small moment of joy in the form of a piece of cake. For the first time that night, Silas Croft looked truly small. Alara didn't wait for a response. The point had been made. She gave a slight nod, turned with the same unhurried grace she had shown all evening, and walked back toward the kitchen, leaving the wreckage of their assumptions behind her. The jazz trio, sensing the shift, began to play again, but the music felt different now, more thoughtful. The atmosphere of the Gilded Sparrow had been irrevocably altered. Later that night, as Alara cleared a nearby table, a young couple stopped her. "I saw what happened," the woman said quietly, her eyes full of admiration. "I just wanted to say, you handled that with so much grace." Her partner nodded earnestly. Alara paused, her hands still holding the plates, and offered them a small, genuine smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm. She didn't linger, but as she walked away, the couple watched her go, their faces bright, as if they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. The power in the room no longer belonged to the loudest voice or the biggest bank account. It belonged to the quiet woman with the silver watch. The story of what happened at the Gilded Sparrow did not stay within its velvet-draped walls. In the age of the smartphone, secrets have a short lifespan. The grainy video Genevieve's friend had taken, capturing the moment Alara revealed her identity, hit social media before the dessert course was even finished. By morning, it was viral. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for justice and drama, devoured the story. It was shared with captions like, "Waitress versus Z, Billionaire, you won't believe who wins, and never judge a book by its cover, ever." Number Waitress owned him, and number Silas Croft were trending on Twitter. The consequences were swift and brutal, a digital hailstorm from which there was no shelter. A prominent finance blog published an article titled, "Arrogance on the Menu. Adler Holdings board member humiliated by his own shareholder." By noon, a leak from within the company confirmed that Lyle, the smirking assistant, had been summarily fired for unprofessional conduct reflecting poorly on the firm. The ripples spread beyond Silas. Genevieve, the woman in the red dress, was tagged relentlessly in the video. The luxury brands that sponsored her influencer lifestyle began to distance themselves. A lucrative contract with a high-end Parisian handbag company was indefinitely postponed. Her curated world of perfection had been shattered by a moment of casual cruelty. Preston, the broker who had demanded his lemon twist, lost a major client. The client, a notoriously private philanthropist, sent a one-line email, "I do not do business with men who find sport in belittling others." It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the quiet, inexorable logic of cause and effect, accelerated by technology. Through it all, Alara remained an island of calm in the hurricane that bore her name. She didn't check her phone. She didn't read the articles or watch the videos. The next day, she woke up early, made coffee for her mother, and they sat together, talking about a book Madeline was reading. Then, she pressed her uniform, tied her hair back, and went to work. Something had changed at the Gilded Sparrow, however. The air was different. The staff, who had always been professionally distant, now looked at her with a quiet, profound respect. Marcus, the gruff, rarely smiling manager, gave her a curt nod that was, for him, the equivalent of a standing ovation. The regulars who had witnessed the event now greeted her by name, their smiles warmer, their eyes holding a newfound appreciation. A lawyer who came in every Tuesday slipped a note with her tip that simply read, "You are an inspiration." Alara tucked it into her apron, her face calm, and kept working. She hadn't sought their praise or validation. She was there for one reason only, and that reason was sipping tea in the corner, waiting for her chocolate torte. But the restaurant itself felt lighter, as if a long overdue lesson in humility had finally been learned by all. A few nights later, a man walked into the Gilded Sparrow. He was tall, and moved with a quiet confidence that drew eyes without demanding them. His suit was understated, but impeccably cut, the kind of quality that didn't need to shout. He requested Elara's section, his voice low and polite, and sat down at a small table without any fuss. The room shifted subtly at his arrival. Conversations dipped, and heads turned before quickly looking away. He was Daniel Sterling, a man whose name carried immense weight in boardrooms across the globe, known for his sharp intellect and his fiercely private nature. He was also Alara's husband. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His presence was a statement in itself. Alara walked over, a small, warm smile touching her lips for the first time that evening. She set a glass of water in front of him, and for a fleeting moment, her hand brushed his. He looked up at her, his eyes soft with a universe of unspoken understanding, and nodded. That was it. No grand gesture, no dramatic speech, just a silent moment of connection that said everything. Genevieve was back that night, on a date with a new man. Her laughter, a little too loud, a little too forced. When she saw Daniel Sterling, her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and the color drained from her face. Preston, at his usual table, kept his gaze fixed on his plate, his fingers tight around his wine glass. Silas Croft hadn't been seen at the restaurant since that night. Word on the street was that he was keeping a low profile, his board meetings now conducted exclusively over video calls. The power in the room had been rebalanced, not by money or status, but by something deeper: truth, dignity. As Alara served a table near the window, a young girl, no older than 10, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder, "is that the lady from the video, the one who stood up to that mean man?" The mother, a quiet woman in a simple dress, smiled and nodded. Alara overheard them, her hand pausing on the tablecloth for a beat. She kept moving, her face serene, but her steps felt a little lighter. She had not sought to be a hero, but she had become one anyway, a quiet symbol of grace under pressure. Later that week, Madeline sat at her usual corner table, her gray hair glowing like a halo under the chandeliers. Alara brought her the slice of chocolate torte and sat with her for a moment, their hands touching across the table. The room watched, but this time, there was no pity or judgment in their gaze. There was only respect. As Alara was wiping down a table at the end of her shift, Marcus, the manager, pulled her aside. "You know," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I've been here 20 years. I've never seen anyone handle a night like you did." He handed her a small envelope. It was a bonus, pooled together from the entire staff's tips, something they had never, ever done before. Alara took it, her fingers brushing the paper. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. She tucked it into her apron and went back to work. But Marcus watched her go, his usual scowl replaced by something that looked remarkably like pride. The story didn't end with a dramatic confrontation or a triumphant resignation. It didn't need to. Alara kept working, kept bringing her mother dessert, kept moving through the world with that quiet, unshakable strength. Her days started with coffee and conversation with Madeline and ended with the familiar weight of her server's tray. She didn't need the job, not with her family's wealth or her shares in Adler Holdings. But she stayed because of the way her mother's face lit up when she tasted that torte, a small, perfect joy in the face of an uncertain future. One evening, a new customer came in, an older woman with a worn coat and tired eyes. She sat alone and ordered only a coffee. Alara brought it to her and noticed the woman's hands were trembling slightly. "Long day?" Alara asked gently. The woman nodded, her eyes weary. "Long life," she replied with a sad smile. Alara smiled back and returned a moment later with a small plate of cookies, placing them next to the coffee. "On the house," she whispered, and walked away. The woman left a crumpled $5 bill, as a tip likely more than she could afford, and a note on a napkin that read, "Thank you for seeing me." Alara tucked the note into her apron, next to the photo of her and Madeline laughing in Central Park. The people who had tried to judge her, to mock her, to make her small, they were the ones paying the price, not because she had fought them, but because the truth, like gravity, always wins in the end. Her victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in knowing, all along, that she didn't have to prove anything at all. Her worth was not up for their debate, it simply was. And that was always enough.